Hi, everyone. We're just waiting for everyone to trickle in. I'm Robert Castillo.
I'm Greg Fields.
And I'm Thomas Donnelly.
And yeah, let's just get started. How about that? I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We are the GK LGBT group of Gerber, Kawasaki Wealth and Investment Management. If you have seen our webinars before, my face and Greg's face is probably familiar, but today we're welcoming Thomas Donnelly, our newest member of the GK LGBT group. He joined our firm recently, and we're lucky to have him because he's also devoted to serving the LGBT community. He's been working with them for a while. So welcome, Thomas. Today we're going to discuss the financial impact of COVID-19 on the LGBT community. And we're going to talk about some statistics about how it's affected the community, but also more importantly, some strategies for what to do with your money to weather any environment, whether it's a pandemic or not. We're going to discuss just a few strategies regarding financial planning and investments. But that said, all of this information is general. It's not meant to be specific. If you have a question about your own situation, feel free to reach out to us because each individual situation needs its own attention, and that's what we're devoted to. Again, past performance is not indicative of future results. We are not tax advisors or legal advisors because there are lawyers and accountants for that. But go ahead and reach out to us to see how we can help you individually after this call. So, as I mentioned, I want to start off with talking about some stats about how COVID-19 has affected the community. And then we're going to go into individually different areas of financial planning and investment management. So I'll start off. COVID-19 has affected the community much more than straight people. And it's largely because of the industries that we work in. So about 46% of LGBT workers in California have been affected by COVID-19 because of their industries. This ranges from healthcare to education, retail, and food service. So in comparison to the rest of the population, it's only about 22% of people who've been affected by COVID-19. So I know, especially here in LA, there's a lot of my clients in entertainment who can't get back to work, can't get back to production, and it's affecting their income. So it's not just people who you think might be the most affected in tourism or what have you. It's really a lot of other industries, and we're going to be talking about some of that today. But I also want to focus on the fact that the LGBT community really encompasses two different worlds. There's this misconception that everyone who's gay and doesn't have kids has a lot of extra money. That's not always the case. While there is some truth to that, in fact, there was a 2014 tax study from the IRS that same-sex couples have the highest income, that's being 100,000 or more. So it's first gay male couples, lesbian couples, and then regular couples in that order. So that's all great, but what about all those people who aren't filing taxes, who are single, who just fall under the radar? And when you take a look at that, 16% of non-LGBT adults fall under the poverty line, whereas 22% of LGBT adults are under the poverty line. And when you talk about transgender people, it's 29% of them fall under poverty line, but Black and Latinx are 40%. So it really ranges all across the spectrum when it comes to the financial matters behind the community. And that's why here at Gerber Kawasaki, we have no minimum. We work with all sorts of clients. And today we're going to talk about financial planning strategies and tax planning strategies that really pertain to anyone. And I want to pass off to Thomas, who's going to start off with talking about year-end tax planning and charitable contributions. So Thomas, why don't you go ahead and start us off with that?
Sure. I kind of just want to start off riffing off of what you were talking about. So many people in our community, their income was impacted during this pandemic. And I've been impressed by the number of individuals I've been speaking with who their income's been impacted, but they haven't filed for their unemployment benefits. Whether they are self-employed and they didn't know that they can during this situation, or they have enough savings that they felt like they shouldn't. We don't know how long this is going to go on, and frankly, it could be a long time. So if you should definitely file for those benefits. And I recommend to my clients a minimum of 3 months in their emergency savings accounts. But if you're self-employed, you should have more. Additionally, if you're in a hard spot, there's possibilities that you could take a COVID-related distribution from a retirement account as a last resort. You should definitely talk to a financial planner first, reach out to myself, Robert, Greg, and I'm sure we would be happy to talk you through kind of the options that you have. That said, the silver lining, if your income's been disrupted, is that it might be a low income year, which presents a lot of tax planning opportunities. So as an example, it could be that you could take capital gains, recognize some capital gains in your portfolio and pay a lower tax rate because it's going to be an overall lower income year. It might also be a good opportunity to explore things like Roth conversions, as an example, or if your income has now dropped below IRA phase out limits, then you might be able to make a tax deductible contribution to an IRA or a Roth IRA. So there's a lot of different tax planning opportunities that you could take advantage of this year.
Thanks, Thomas. And I actually wanted to touch on something that you said about Roth conversions and just taking money out of retirement accounts in general. So what Thomas is referencing is the CARES Act that was passed by Congress that allows us to take up to 100% loan from a 401k. Or take money out of an IRA or Roth IRA and avoid the penalty and the taxes. Well, I take that back. You don't avoid the taxes because you never avoid taxes in the US. What you can do is delay the taxes and pay them over 3 years, or get back your refund if you pay taxes on it over 3 years if you put your money back. So this is much more complicated than it sounds. You don't just put your money back over 3 years whenever you want, and they magically send you a check. You actually have to file your tax return this year, pay all the taxes up front, and then amend your tax return as you pay back your contribution or your taxes over the next 3 years. So you have to amend taxes. You have to, be okay with paying all the taxes up front. So it's not so easy, and that's why you have to talk to a financial advisor and a tax advisor about this. And then something else about the Roth conversion. So people who have high incomes don't normally qualify for a Roth IRA. However, this might be a year for you to consider a Roth conversion if you do qualify, because of the low income tax that Thomas mentioned. So essentially, there's something called the Secures Act. Not to get too complicated, it's similar to the CARES Act, some other legal stuff that was created last year. And it takes away some of the benefits of IRAs. So if you have an IRA, traditional IRA, rollover IRA, and you pass it on to your kids, they're going to have to cash it out within 10 years. It used to be over their entire lifetime. So that's obviously a big downside, because that means your beneficiaries must deplete that account in 10 years. Doesn't matter how much is in there. That's why if you have the ability to convert to a Roth IRA, then you can avoid that altogether. Now, again, you want to talk to a tax advisor about this, because you're going to want to make sure you don't withhold from the IRA when you convert. You're going to pay. It's better if you pay the taxes out of pocket, because just the math doesn't work out if you withhold from the IRA. And again, the reason you want to do this is so that your beneficiaries are not forced to cash out their inheritance from you over 10 years. Instead, they can have it for the rest of their lives, and they can cash it out as they deem necessary if it's in a Roth IRA. Plus, it's going to be tax-free when they inherit it. So there's a lot of different ways that you can plan your IRA distributions if you need to take them in 2020. Again, you have until December 31st of this year to access your money without penalties from your IRA and your 401ks. You have to talk to an advisor about this. It's not going to be easy. So that's why we're here to help you.
Yeah, something else about the CARES Act that I think is really relevant to the community is some of the changes that were made for charitable contributions this year. So, nonprofits that serve the LGBT community are really hurting. Nonprofits in general are hurting right now. There was a survey I was reading that came out last month that showed that among US-based nonprofits, 75% are seeing reduced revenue as a result of the pandemic. That is their service revenue, government contributions or government grants, and then reduced contributions. Everyone's hurting right now. And so one of the interesting things that the CARE Act did was it increased the AGI cap on charitable deductions for cash gifts. So normally it's 70% of your AGI is the limit that you could give for a cash gift. So they raised that up to 100% for 2020. This is 2020 only. Additionally, if you take the standard deduction that a lot of people do with the current tax law, the CARE Act now allows a new above the line charitable deduction of up to $300 for a cash contribution to a qualifying charity in 2020. So I think that if you are okay right now, income-wise and with your emergency fund, and you have some extra cash to spare, nonprofits need your help, and working with a financial advisor like myself or Robert or Greg, we can definitely help you structure your charitable giving in a way that is the most efficient from a tax standpoint for you.
Thanks, and that's a great segue to what Greg is going to talk about today. So if you want to make a difference, whether it's giving money to your favorite charity or investing your money for a better cause, right? And knowing that you're doing it with a conscience, Greg is going to talk to us about how you can invest your money responsibly. And we've actually had a webinar about this, but we're going to go into a little bit more details. And Greg's here to do that for us.
Right. Thanks, Robert. Obviously, COVID has been a devastating event in our country. We've lost 150,000 of our fellow citizens and counting, unfortunately. However, the one bright spot to this pandemic is it's really kind of raised awareness in terms of inclusion, equality, social justice. And, it started obviously with George Floyd, but this has been a great turnaround for our country because I think, here's the thing about Americans, right? We're very idealistic. We have this amazing, Constitution and our founding fathers, and I think people just sort of took a position. Well, equality, it's in our Constitution, and we're Americans and we believe in that sort of thing. But it's not enough to believe in it. You actually have to act on it and make it happen. You have to hold people accountable, and this is what's really kind of developed during this pandemic, is that people have started to demand that companies take a position when it comes to social justice. And the fact of the matter is that the companies that have taken a position, and COVID has also kind of exposed the companies that really don't care about their employees, but in this case, it's very interesting that the companies that actually have very high scores when it comes to taking care of their employees, diversity, they actually did better this year than the overall S&P. They actually outperformed the S&P over the last 3 years. So, we talk about social investing or sustainable investing. There's 3 different factors. Everybody probably knows that as ESG, environmental, how does a company take care of the environment? What's its carbon footprint? Governance, which is more, how does a company adhere to the law? Are they constantly getting sued by, government agencies? And that gets expensive. And then, of course, the middle factor, the one that we're focused on today, is social. And that has to do with, what is a company's ability, what's its commitment to building a diverse workforce. And what's interesting about that is studies have shown that a diverse workforce actually will result in about a 37% increase in sales, 31% increase in profitability. So there are good, not just social reasons, but also good business reasons for investing in these types of companies. Now, we're a very unique firm in that we take those things into consideration even when investing ourselves. We try to stay away from the fossil fuel industry, for example. Several of our companies were actually, the companies that we invest in were actually named to the top 100 best ESG companies, scored just solely by social factors. Some of the companies that we invest in that made that list were, for example, NVIDIA. NVIDIA is a chip company, an amazing company. It's got 17,000 employees. And especially during this pandemic, they really showed themselves that they cared about their employees. They had, resource centers for people that needed to call in about their mental health or about technology, whatever they needed. And they actually have resource groups at NVIDIA, one of which is an LGBT group. And they meet with the CEO, Jason Wang, every year just to basically go through how the company can do a better job with their LGBT employees. So, it really is, it's kind of a great thing to be able to invest in companies that not only that do you believe in them, but they're also profitable and highly successful. So it is possible to have both, to have your cake and eat it too. And that's what's very exciting to me about this space right now.
Yeah, so it doesn't mean that you have to invest in oil or tobacco or guns to make money, is what Greg is getting at. So if you have a portfolio that hasn't done well this year and still is down on the year, let us take a look at it. There are many companies out there nowadays that can do well and still be socially responsible. That wasn't the case 10, 15 years ago, but there's so much more data available to us now that we are able to create portfolios devoted to what you believe in.
Well, Robert, we can also customize portfolios too. Like if we need to screen specifically for social factors, we can do that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So if there's a certain industry, certain company that you want to stay away from, we can make sure that we're not investing in that. And that's the beauty of having an actual person manage your account instead of a computer or a target date fund where you don't know what you're invested in. If you have a 401k, you probably know what a target date fund is, but you probably don't know what companies are in it. Right. So that's something that we can do for you and help guide you on.
Just on the ESG fund, it's somewhat important, I think, especially for the LGBT community, if they see something, in their 401k, or if they're, self-directing their own trades and they just see a fund that says ESG. That it could mean a lot of different things. So it could be that they don't invest in gun stocks. It could also mean that they don't invest in so-called sin stocks like tobacco, alcohol, pornography, adult-related stuff. It could mean that they don't invest, in companies that have any connection to the abortion industry or anything like that. And so it's important to really get targeted in terms of investing your values. Pull out the exposures that you don't want to have, but keep the ones that you do. And so working with a financial advisor like the three of us could certainly help you do that.
Absolutely.
You have anything else to add, Greg, to the ESG?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's really important because, as Thomas points out correctly, people don't know what they're invested in a lot of the time. And, and there can be hundreds of companies in a particular ETF or mutual fund. And, I've actually found, sort of doing a deep dive on some of these funds for clients, I find things that in there that I don't personally like. And there was an incident I guess this was earlier this year, where one of the biggest money managers in the world had an ESG fund, and it had a gun company in it. And they apologized to everybody and said that they'd made a mistake. But if you don't have a financial advisor to do the homework for you on that and know what to look for, it's just, you're kind of at the mercy. You're trusting these gigantic money managers, and not all of them are on the up and up, or not all of them are really doing their due diligence on some of these products.
Yeah, I just did an analysis for a client's portfolio this morning. We had a meeting actually, and she is a big environmentalist and is really concerned about global warming. And she had some green energy ETFs in her portfolio, but when you take a deeper dive into some of the other mutual funds, only 15% or less of her portfolio was designated as low carbon by Morningstar. And so I was able to go in and do that deep dive with her. And she just had no idea what she was invested in.
Yeah. And a lot of the times, you can be invested in something that maybe has a great carbon footprint, but, doesn't have that sort of commitment to diversity. And those are things that, again, you really need to be a professional to do the work and figure that out.
Yeah, so COVID-19 has really made people realize that they're either lacking in certain financial planning aspects to their lives, or that their portfolio isn't as secure as they once thought. So whether you need to redo your portfolio because it didn't really look great in March or April and it still doesn't, or if you are in a certain situation where you have a lower income, like Thomas and I mentioned, where certain doors open up when it comes to tax planning and financial planning. We're here to help you out. I wanted to touch on again, if you have a lower income this year compared to every other year, especially if you're in a partnership, I want to talk about domestic partnerships, because if you're married, it's pretty clear cut, same planning as all other married couples, right? Depending on where you were before marriage, but if you were in a domestic partnership and choose to be in one, now remember, domestic partnerships are now available to everyone. You don't have to be in a same-sex relationship to be in one. That used to be the case. Right. But now, if you're 18 and above, you can register as a domestic partnership in the state of California. It is state-specific, so we are speaking about California. So now this planning is really relevant to more and more people. And one thing that people don't realize is that if you're in a domestic partnership, you have to claim your partner's income, half of their income, on your federal tax return. Even though you file married in the state of California and single and on the federal level, you have to claim 50% of your partner's income. And that counts for their deductions, their withholdings, the taxes that they have to pay, like on Social Security, especially if they're self-employed. So if you're self-employed, as many of my clients are in LA, you have to pay a lot of more taxes, twice this amount on Social Security. So this could be split with your partner without you even realizing. However, there's a way to avoid this by having a domestic partnership agreement and transmuting your property and earnings from community to individual property. But just keep in mind that this can create even more problems when it comes to estate planning, because now you don't have community property. And if you own a house, or if you have certain accounts that are no longer community property, then estate planning becomes a problem. Again, that's why situations can be very complicated if you're not married in a same-sex relationship. And that's exactly what we can help you do.
Right. And I think with, the thing about trusts and community properties, you have to actively move those assets into a trust. It doesn't just happen after you're together for so many years. I think that's a misperception that people have, that community property is just kind of automatic. It's not really. You have to have a lawyer. You have to, get the documents done, especially if you have a trust.
Right. And I actually did a webinar for our LGBT group with an estate planning attorney, which you can find on our website, where we go into much more detail about estate planning for same-sex couples. And of course, again, reach out to us, because you can only learn so much from a few minutes of a webinar.
Yeah, totally.
All right. Is there anything else that you guys would like to contribute to today's call?
I would just mention maybe a couple more of the companies that we like in this space that are very strong for their support of diversity. Microsoft is a company that is always popping up on these lists. Also, Next Era Energy. Maybe this is a company you haven't heard of, but it's the largest producer of sustainable energy in the world. Great green. So it's a green company, but it also scores very high for social factors. And also Verizon scores very high. They've made a real effort in the last few years to increase the diversity of their company, and for very good reason. I mean, if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense if you're a consumer-facing industry, right? Because you want to be able to appeal to everyone, not just sort of a subset of people. You want to appeal to a broad audience, and you need to have people inside your company that understand, that are a reflection of your customer base. So that I like all those companies for their in terms of their social scoring.
Great, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, I think that's pretty much everything that we've got to discuss. We're going to cut this short, unless, Thomas, would you like to add anything else? You're our newest member and our star for today.
Yeah, so I would just underscore the pandemic, as horrible as it is, and it is pretty freaking bad, there may be silver linings. So talk to a financial advisor, review your portfolio, review your tax and estate planning, make sure that you're on track for retirement and any of the goals you might have, and try to make the most of this situation. And if you've been impacted, your income has been reduced, definitely a great time to talk to a financial advisor to make sure that you're never in a rough position like this again.
All right. Thank you. We look forward to speaking with you. Reach out.